Good morning, OFE, and thank you for having me this morning. My name is Nicole Rabe. I'm a senior research advisor and previous soil specialist with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. I'm really happy to be here today and to talk to you about data and land use decisions, getting value from farmer soil and land resource data. To quickly give you some geographical context, that's Ontario on the bottom right. And really, the purpose of today is to talk to you about some current programs that are underway around the collection of soil data and land use information. Why is producer data important to a sustainable food production system? In Ontario, the impetus was we were having water quality issues in Lake Erie. The severity of the blue-green algae blooms in the lake were continuously causing drinking water source issues as well as economic issues stemming from recreation and tourism. And this really drove a need to develop an understanding of a current day baseline for soil health in the province. We knew that the soil resource was giving more CO2 to the atmosphere than it was increasing soil organic carbon. We knew we were at 68% of our land base in an unsustainable erosion risk category. And we also understood that there was slow adoption on the use of cover crops. So to establish a baseline, it really needed all of the agricultural sector to get together and acknowledge the path forward. And so we developed the Ontario Soil Strategy, and we are now in the implementation phase where 24 key agri-food sector organizations are prioritizing the action plan around improving soil health in Ontario. A key learning from the public consultation process from 2018 forward was that we have siloed data, and there's a lot to be gained if we consolidate that data around the soil resource and leverage it as best we can as a collective whole. So while ecosystem style slides are really trendy right now, at the risk of being trendy, I wanted to share with you a slide that sort of illustrates all the partners that we're working with in the soil strategy. And a lot of these partners have very specialized interests. And so I guess the key message here for us to understand is how do you acknowledge those interests in the collection of soil information, but also come together in a mutually beneficial way. And so working through that process through a public consultation piece really helped give us the background information we needed to understand how well our stakeholders understood the issues. That part alone was well worth the effort. And then now they're also around a table called the Soil Action Group, where they're coming up with their own implementation plan to get the structure around this for that shared delivery of soil programming across the province. I think some of the things I want to share with you today is that this practice of collecting soil land use data and soil information is really a multiple programmatic approach in Ontario, and it's quite comprehensive. And so just to give you a glimpse, there's sort of three portions to this part of the story, whereby we, as the Ministry of Agriculture, provide cost share funding through third-party delivery mechanisms like our relationship with Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association, who then deliver those grant programs. They also deliver other soil-related programs that were a result of the strategy. One is known as the Farmland Health Checkup, and that is really about a reflection of the farmer sitting with a certified crop advisor at a kitchen table and discussing their goals for their soil health practices on the farm. The top right kind of gives you an idea of some networks or organizations where perhaps government was part of the beginning of a project, but really those projects have taken flight now and don't necessarily rely on government anymore and are well supported by the sector organizations that are in those networks. One example would be the 4R certification program, where the crop input suppliers across the province adopted the Ohio program, adapted it to our conditions, and are now successfully delivering that in their own consortium with Under Fertilizer Canada as their administrator. And so part of that original memorandum of cooperation was grain farmers, Ontario Federation of Agriculture, Christian Farmers, and the Ontario Agribusiness Association. And the crop input suppliers are a key part of this puzzle because they really do literally see the most acres in a given year and talk to the most farmers at the counter each and every single day of that growing season. On the bottom left, this is more about OMAFRA's investments and how we influence the conference circuit in Ontario and ensure that our soil health messages are being carried through those conferences. So you'll see two examples during the pandemic. 3 of our conferences joined forces and delivered a virtual version called the Ontario Agricultural Conference. And we also recently were able to deliver a quasi-virtual North American Manure Expo that we host periodically in Ontario as well to demonstrate professionalism and nutrient management. So I just want to draw your attention to the fact that building soil is a really long-term plan, and seeing efficiencies and yield increases and improved profits from building your soil health is a very long game. So what we tried to acknowledge in our program design is that you have to have a space for near, mid, and long-term programs. Without that, we aren't acknowledging that this process is not always easy and that sometimes seeing those profits takes a while. So I'm going to switch gears here now and just give you your first example of a longer term infrastructure piece that the ministry is developing called OASIS, the Ontario Agricultural Soil Information System. And really, this is our effort to get our own ducks in a row within the ministry. In other words, we've had a lot of attrition and retirement in the ministry. And really what we recognized is we needed a home, a centralized home, a structured home for that long-term soil information and land use data. And so this is a robust knowledge management system to house that data, structure the data, and it's also an application that would one day allow us to integrate across agri-food programs and platforms to try and get to that systems thinking that the ministry always needs for informed decision making and informed policy. You can see a picture on the bottom of the different components of that system that would house both agronomy information and also baseline soil data from both our commodity specialists and our soil specialists who are responsible for soil mapping in the province. And at one point in time, we hope that once the system is implemented and we can then start giving value add back to producers for participating in contributing some information, then we would go public with the system. But that is a very future state point in time. The current few phases are to get it built and get our specialists trained on the importance of integrating with the system for the long haul and ensuring that we have a safe space for that data to reside. The second example of a program that we have ongoing right now is called the Ontario Topsoil Inventory. We chose the word topsoil as to not be scientific and pedology based in our language, and hopefully that this really resonated with farmers keeping the topsoil on their farm as a productivity issue. And the part about this program is that we actually are cold calling farmers, and this has given us some really interesting conversation with those folks that aren't necessarily engaged in the soil health conversations around the province. And we are sort of doing all aspects of soil health, the physical examination of the topsoil, the biological and the chemical. Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association supported us. And the key parts are we also do, in addition to digging a shallow soil pit to examine the status of topsoil at 3 sort of slope positions around the province, whereby we selected those sites using some very advanced digital soil mapping techniques, is that we do a land management survey so that we understand the practices affiliated with that data collection process on the farm. The lessons learned here: absentee landowners, really difficult. We need their permission to do the work, and that was a real challenge. The pro here is the knowledge translation benefits. Our extension specialists are having conversations with those not engaged, and that's a key part of our learning process to drive better programs. And lastly, it's the sales pitch. You need a sales pitch. And so we share back the data with them. We warn them it's not necessarily designed as an agronomic program, but there are some key nutrient information in those reports that they could use alongside of the physical inspection of the topsoil to help give them some foundation to making future decisions with their land management practices. The last example I want to share with you today is really a midterm example where we were successful for the first time in OMAFRA history in getting a nearly 5-year program off the ground with soil and crop, where we were going to continue the monitoring edge of field water quality efforts that we had been doing in the past with our conservation authorities, but we were adding a whole new component to explore soil health indicators on farm with paired trials in the field to identify those indicators and their effectiveness. The really great part about this program is that we implemented some good data management practices as part of our programmatic design. And so OSCA agreed to do a data management plan with all of the partners in this project to ensure for the long haul we knew where that structured data would be and that future researchers who wanted to play in this space could have access to that information fairly readily from those collecting it. And the last part of this that I want to bring to your attention is a really key aspect of the long-term planning for this program beyond government. And that is to say, we were hoping that on a few of these sites across Ontario, we could get industry partnership and they could actually get a life of their own where they're supported for monitoring through those partnerships. So just a little snapshot here. This is where I want to bring to you some of the success stories of a collaborative learning model like this with farmers on farm in the collection of the soil information. It gives you also a sense on a case study basis what the benefits are to the farmer and also what their interests are. So the main thing was is we wanted, for example, with Kevin to have a conversation about his interests. And his interests were he wanted to bring in municipal compost, or he had been, but he hadn't been doing it in a way that really benefited the research community. And he also wanted to test best management practices in conjunction with one another, not just in isolation of one another. So he had been doing some cover crop species. And so really the fundamental baseline for this particular paired trial was that we had a conversation about replicating the strips and doing some baseline soil health measurements in those strips, which we call sentinel sites, that we could then revisit in 4 or 5 years to come back to and say, can we detect a change? Recognizing that maybe 5 years isn't long enough for soil health, but it was a start. The benefit to Kevin was really about bringing him back to the focus of improving soils on his farm. And it could be that he had lost sight of the importance of this for the long haul, and he was really excited to become a member of the Ontario Soil Network and then also have the data, the hard data, behind his practices so that it wasn't just sharing stories anymore, but it was actually sharing an evidence-based story with both government and other farmers in his region about his soil health practices. Here's a multi-generational case study about Bruce Hudson, who is managing hog manure on his farm and has a firm grasp in how managing that nutrient benefits soil health. I think the key thing I want to bring to you here is that understanding research terms is really key in an on-farm trial and making sure we have that common understanding. The other thing is these projects are always in flux. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's reciprocal learning between researcher and farmer because decisions happen quickly, and it just depends on the growing season. So constant contact is a factor around the quality of soil information that you're collecting. And lastly, it's really about the social interaction of farmers in a neighborhood. And so Bruce was really excited to get off the farm and talk to Duncan, who was also in an on-farm trial, and share their experiences. And that peer-to-peer learning and interaction with both researchers and multiple farmers in a network is a key piece that goes well beyond the data. I'll leave you with 3 parting messages. It's really a multi-pronged approach that's stemming through the near, the mid, and the long term with provincial government programs around collecting improved soil health information. The soil resource data collection really relies on a shared public-private interest. It's going to help leverage what finite resources we have. And lastly, driving soil health best management practice adoption is not easy. It's not one size fits all. there is a place for shared learning and that we need to understand the complexity of the decision-making process on farm to truly appreciate those barriers. So thanks, OFE, for having me today. It's been my pleasure. I hope you do soil your undies, and I hope I've piqued your curiosity in having those meaningful conversations with farmers about their curiosity and take that into your future work. Have a great day.